Best friend stayed 2 weeks, started dating my ex-wife, called me loser, my reality. Check 3 months ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. When Mike called me at 2 a.m. slurring his words about getting evicted, I actually felt sorry for him. My divorced dad brain kicked in. Maybe it was the lonely Tuesday night. Maybe it was remembering how he'd helped me move out of my marriage house 2 years back. I told him he could crash at my place for 2 weeks while he got back on his feet. Last Tuesday, my 10-year-old daughter Emma looked me dead in the eye over her Cheerios and said, "Uncle Mike says you're a loser, and that's why Mommy left you." My 12-year-old son Jake nodded along like this was common knowledge now. That's when I found out my best friend of 15 years had been living rent-free in my guest room while secretly dating my ex-wife and poisoning my kids against me. The worst part? Mike had been telling everyone at O'Malley's bar downtown that I was too pathetic to kick him out and that he was basically the kid's new dad now. He'd landed a bartending gig there 3 weeks ago, but somehow never mentioned moving out. Instead, he'd been using my house as his personal bachelor pad while I worked double shifts at the engineering firm to keep up with child support and mortgage payments. When I confronted him that morning, he actually laughed, like genuinely threw his head back and cackled while spreading peanut butter on my bread with my knife in my kitchen. Said I should be grateful he was helping with the kids, since I was obviously failing as a father. That's when I realized Mike hadn't just overstayed his welcome. He'd systematically inserted himself into my life to replace me. Updated. Holy cow, I wasn't expecting this response. Yeah, this really happened, and it gets worse. For those asking, how I didn't see it coming, hindsight is 20/20, and I was apparently blind. Quick question though, would you have trusted your best friend in this situation? Mike and I met in college at Ohio State. He was the guy who could talk his way into any party, charm any girl, and somehow pass classes without studying. I was the engineering nerd who helped him with calculus in exchange for social confidence. We'd been through everything together: his dad's funeral, my wedding to Sarah, late-night Xbox marathons, bachelor parties, the works. But there were always red flags I ignored, like how he'd borrow $20 and forget to pay it back, how he'd crash on various friends' couches between apartments, how every job loss was someone else's fault. Every breakup was because the girl was crazy. I kept making excuses because that's what friends do, right? After my divorce 2 years ago, Mike was surprisingly supportive. Helped me pack, bought beer, listened to me vent about custody battles and Sarah's new yoga obsession. When he got evicted from his studio apartment in January for not paying rent, it felt like karma giving me a chance to return the favor. The first week was actually fine. He helped with dishes, played video games with Jake, even fixed my leaky faucet. But week 2 rolled around with no apartment hunting. Week 3 brought mysterious phone calls he'd take outside. By week 4, I noticed my grocery bill had doubled, and my Netflix continue watching list was full of shows I'd never seen. The real kicker was discovering he'd been parking his beat-up Honda 3 streets over so Sarah wouldn't see it when she picked up the kids. He'd been walking back to my house like some kind of covert operation. Meanwhile, I'm getting texts from neighbors asking if I knew some guy was coming and going from my place at odd hours. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning in March. I'd just gotten back from Jake's baseball game when I found Mike in my living room wearing my OSU sweatshirt, feet up on my coffee table, FaceTiming someone. The someone turned out to be Sarah, and they were laughing about some inside joke while my daughter colored at the kitchen table 10 feet away. I stood there for a full minute, watching my ex-wife giggle at my best friend through my phone screen while he lounged in my house wearing my clothes. Emma looked up from her coloring book and said, "Uncle Mike talks to Mommy every day now. He says you don't know how to make her happy, but he does." The room went silent except for Sarah's voice coming through the phone. "Mike, is that—" Oh, click. The call ended, and Mike slowly turned to face me with this sheepish grin that made me want to throw him through my sliding glass door. But instead of exploding, something cold settled in my chest. I walked upstairs, grabbed his duffel bag from my guest room, and brought it down. Set it by the front door without saying a word. Mike started his usual routine, the excuses, the explanations, the "it's not what it looks like" garbage. I just pointed at the door. That's when he showed his true colors. Started yelling about how I was jealous and couldn't handle that Sarah preferred a real man. Told the kids their dad was kicking out their favorite uncle because I'm selfish. Made Emma cry and Jake look at me like I was the bad guy. Then he grabbed his bag and slammed my door so hard it rattled the windows. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, I started hearing things. My buddy Derek at the gym mentioned seeing Mike and Sarah at Applebee's. My neighbor asked why my friend was bad-mouthing me to anyone who'd listen at O'Malley's. The worst was when Jake came home from a weekend at his mom's and asked why I never bought them cool stuff like Uncle Mike did. Turns out Mike had been playing sugar daddy with money he didn't have, promising Sarah he'd help with the kids, telling everyone I was a deadbeat dad who couldn't keep a friend or a wife. He'd somehow convinced her he was this changed man, ready for commitment and responsibility, the same guy who'd been eating my Hot Pockets and leaving dirty dishes in my sink for 3 months. The final straw was discovering he'd been using my address for his job applications and had actually put me down as a reference without asking. His new boss at O'Malley's called me to verify his employment history, and I nearly choked when he mentioned Mike was such a responsible guy, really has his life together now. That's when I realized Mike hadn't just betrayed our friendship. He'd stolen my life and reputation while living under my roof. He was telling people I was the problem while using my generosity to rebuild his image, and Sarah was buying every word of it. Updated. The comments are wild. Some of you are more pissed than I was. Yes, I had receipts for everything. Mike was about to learn that messing with an engineer's life is like playing chess with someone who thinks 10 moves ahead. Was I wrong to dig into his background? I spent the next week doing what I do best, research and planning. Started with Mike's social media, which painted quite a picture. Photos of him and Sarah at restaurants I couldn't afford, posts about new beginnings and real family values. But more importantly, I found his old posts about maxed-out credit cards, unpaid student loans, and that DUI from last year he'd forgotten to mention. A quick background check revealed the beautiful truth. Mike owed $52,000 in combined credit, car debt, student loans, and unpaid rent from previous apartments. His credit score was somewhere in the depths of hell, and he had 3 outstanding warrants for unpaid parking tickets. The responsible family man Sarah thought she was dating was broke, dishonest, and basically living a complete lie. The next part was almost too easy. I called O'Malley's and asked for Mike, pretending to be his old college buddy. Got his shift schedule, learned about his new, reformed image he'd been selling to his boss. Apparently, he'd claimed to be 2 years sober and studying to become a social worker. The same guy who'd polished off my beer stash and couldn't hold a job for more than 6 months. I started with his boss, Tom. Casual conversation about hiring reliable people these days. Mentioned I'd had to let a friend go after discovering his drinking problem and some missing cash. Didn't name names, just painted a concerning picture about people who seemed trustworthy on the surface. Tom seemed very interested in my perspective on character assessment. Within a week, Mike's shifts got cut in half. Then Sarah started asking him questions about his finances when he couldn't pay for dinner. The fairy tale he'd been selling was crumbling faster than his credit score. 2 months later, Mike was sleeping in his car behind the Walmart parking lot. Sarah had dumped him after seeing his credit report and realizing she'd been dating someone with negative net worth who'd been lying about literally everything. His boss at O'Malley's had fired him for showing up drunk and shorting the register. My relationship with my kids improved dramatically once Mike's poison wasn't in their ears. Jake apologized for believing the garbage about me being a loser. Emma started asking to spend extra time at my house again. Sarah even admitted she'd made a mistake, though that bridge was thoroughly burned. The best part was running into Mike at Target 3 weeks ago. He was buying ramen noodles with food stamps while I was picking up new school supplies for the kids. He tried to start some conversation about old times, but I just smiled and walked away. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well while watching karma work its magic. Updated. It's been 6 months now, and Mike is apparently working at a gas station and living with his mom. Sarah's dating a yoga instructor now, which honestly seems perfect for her. My kids are happy, my house is peaceful, and I've learned to trust my instincts better. Thanks for all the support, Reddit family. Final question. Do you think I went too far, or did Mike get exactly what he deserved?